Shall we start? Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here with us today for this global symposium on surrogacy. Laura and I are very excited to have you here today. My name is Giulia DeLisle, and I'm an associate professor at the University of Massachusetts Lowell. I would like to say thank you to my Department of World Languages and Cultures and the University of Massachusetts Lowell, who supported this initiative and this conference day. Laura.
And I'm Laura Lazzari. I'm an affiliate scholar and researcher at Georgetown University and researcher at the Foundation for the Medical Humanities, the Sasso Corbaro Foundation for the Medical Humanities in Switzerland. And I would like to thank you. The Foundation, the Medical Humanities Foundation in Switzerland, and Georgetown University, the Medical Humanities Initiative at Georgetown University, and the Department of Romance Languages at George Washington University for helping us to organize this event today.
So let me start by saying thank you to our keynote speakers, Rossella Anitori and Darel Gregorio, as well as Rickie Solinger, who will join us later today, who have kindly accepted our invitation and will enrich our day with their work and insights. I'd like to say thank you to all the panelists and moderators that will help us share ideas and examine their work. Thank you also to the audience, students and colleagues who are taking the time to listen and reflect on questions related to politics of reproduction and surrogacy. We understand that surrogacy is a complex and controversial question that raises disagreements within the intellectual community, the feminist community, the scientific community, and public opinion. We're here today to have an open and productive dialogue, to listen and engage in respectful conversations in an effort to reflect upon the multiplicity of interests at stake. Our main goal today is to understand how surrogacy has been represented in literature, in film, in visual arts, social media. The question is really, what do the arts and media tell us about surrogacy, and how can they, or do they help us in shaping our ideas and guiding our society moving forward? The symposium is happening at a time when Italy, my home country, has recently declared surrogacy a universal crime. Surrogacy has also labeled as uterus for rental in Italy, has been illegal there since 2004, punishable by a prison sentence from 3 months to 2 years, and a fine of 600,000 to 1 million euros. A week ago, with 84 votes in favor and 58 against, the Italian Senate confirmed its total criminalization. Well, for many years, Italian couples were able to travel to other countries where the practice was not banned to find medical-assisted procreation help. With this new law in place, Italians are now officially prohibited from seeking surrogacy abroad as well. The current government defended its position by claiming that their intention is to eradicate the exploitation of the female body and children. The opposition and the progressive media have condemned the law, focusing in particular on the consequences that this law will have on children and discrimination based on the way children come into the world, as occurred with illegitimate children in post-war Italy, as Cecilia D'Elia recently did at the Senate. Surrogacy is contributing to changing the model of the family that has been, as we have been intended and understood it for centuries now, a model that is based on biological reproduction, blood ties. And as we know, when it comes to surrogacy, multiple forces and powers are at stake that affect people's rights, privileges, and ethics. There is a clear need to find ways to prevent exploitation, corruption, and risks. We're still missing the words, we think, the clarity, the data to define and talk about surrogacy and its implication. But we're confident that today's presentations and conversations will help us find more words, explore and understand more points of view. So I would like to start unfolding some of this discourse on surrogacy, its contradictions, its many points of view, with our two first guest speakers, filmmakers and documentarist Rossella Anitori and Darel Di Gregorio. Thank you for being here with us today. Just a few brief words about them. Rossella and Darel are anthropologists and journalists who carry out investigations and reports for important national newspapers such as L'Espresso, La Repubblica, and Il Fatto Quotidiano. In 2016, they founded Wild Movie Production and made the short documentary My Little Dhaka on the Bangladeshi community in Rome. That received special mention at the Visioni Doc Festival at the Cineteca di Bologna and Lenovo Award at the African, Asian, and Latin American Film Festival in Milan. In 2007, they made the feature-length documentary Il Tempo delle Api, the story of two friends who live in a sustainable community in the countryside that won the Brave New World tribute at the Thessaloniki Documentary Film Festival. Surrogacy Underground is one of their latest work that came out in 2023. So thank you again for being here. Surrogacy Underground is a spatial journey that takes us to Greece, to the United Kingdom, Italy. Through Italy, we get this connection with Ukraine. It investigates surrogacy from many different perspectives. We follow the stories of women and couples who are unable to conceive, hear about the experiences of surrogate mothers, and also those of children born from surrogacy. So I would like to start by asking you what led you to explore the question of surrogacy and make this documentary. Was it your idea, or were you asked to work on it by some organization?
Hello, everybody. Good morning. Thank you for your invitation. We are very happy to be here. We are very glad to share our movie with you. And respecting your question, let's say that our project on surrogacy was part of a wider reflection on parenthood. At that time, when we start working on this movie, we weren't parents. We weren't still parents. Now we have a young 4 years old girl, and we are happy with that. But at that time, we were wondering if we were able to be parents. And we were wondering also about the desire to have a child today, and about the pressure that our society put on ourselves about this issue. And of course, there were a lot of our friends fighting with this issue about because they had some problems with their reproduction. Luckily, we hadn't, but we were interested because we lived very near their concerns about to be or not to be a parent, because there was a big desire to be, but there were also a lot of problems to get into it. So surrogacy, of course, is a model that challenges the Western kinship model based on the blood ideology and biological reproduction. So it was, let's say, the more extreme form of desire to be a parent, because it's a tough process for parents that decided to go into it, and it's not everywhere welcomed, especially in our country. So we decided to start our journey. We decided to start from Europe, because it's near, and because we can understand better the culture. And so we went in Greece, we went in United Kingdom, and then we ended up with our country. 3 different law frames, 3 different cultural understanding of this practice. And it was very interesting to understand how can the law can shape the culture, and the culture can shape the law. They were interconnected. We decided to give the voices to the person that were really involved in this issue. So we decided to meet in person the surrogates, to meet the sons and the daughter of surrogacy, and the intentional parents. So we decided to move from a voice-centered perspective, giving them the possibility to represent themselves. What we noticed was that in the newspaper, in the media in general, unfortunately, when the surrogacy issue is talked by people that are not involved in that. And people that are involved are excluded by this dialogue. So our movie is a tribute to their voices. This was our first goal. And also to understand the perspective of surrogate mother, because a lot of time we talk about women as just exploited persons in this process, but the people we met weren't exploited. The people we met were protagonists of their choices. And this is what we decided to bring on the screen, the experience that people we met.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think you touched a little bit already on this, but you decided to focus on Europe, and can you tell us a little bit more about the steps that you took to put this documentary together? There are a lot of moments in it's interesting because the documentary somehow very much and poetically combined outdoor spaces with indoor. There's the camera takes you to places and moves you around, so you understand you're going from one place to another, and then there's this intimacy that you enter once you are inside the private home of the people that you connected to. So I was wondering if you can tell us a little bit about the steps that you took, how you put this documentary together, how you combine the two spaces, the private and the public space, which seems to me that, again, in a way, with your documentary, you kind of confirm that what is private is also a public matter,
So let's say that the documentary reflects our journey in this issue, in the sense that we didn't have in the beginning a clear idea of what would came out of this project. Actually, when we began, we wasn't parents, and we weren't parents at the moment, and we also were also critics about this issue, because what we found during our research was a lot of material against this practice. So we also felt this pressure about society that at a certain point of your life, if you don't become pregnant as a woman, or if you don't become a parent as a man, it looks like something is not working well. So in the first moment, we decided to go in Greece, where we from the study we did was one of the most procreation touristic country in the world, because have this legal framework in which all the people from all over the world are welcome to go there. So we realized that there could be a good start point to know better this issue. But there we realized that it's a country that from one side it's open to all over the world, but to the other side it's closed to the same-sex parents. And there is a big stigma about infertility. And we realize how controversial it is to legalize a practice like that, where there is an open mind culture that helps the woman to be happy to offer themselves to be a surrogate. So during this trip, somehow we confirmed that if there is no a culture and a legal frame that support this practice, can happen exploitation of the women, and also a mismatch between intentional parents and surrogate mothers, and also the children that born through this practice maybe never, they will never know that how they came to this world. But this was just a part, and I don't want to say too much for the people that still have to watch the movie. We came back to Italy. After all the interviews we collected, we were quite confused, because we also met some people from the Rainbow family in Greece that helps us to understand how complex and how much more there would be to go deeper in this issue, to understand better this practice. So after 6 months, we went in UK, where we discovered a totally different world of a country that are in this issue since the 80s. So developed over the years a strong guidelines that permits to, first of all, avoid cases of exploitation, and most of all, try to create the environment to get this to get everything on the light. So in this case, we realize how different it will be if a practice like that, it's first of all open just for the people of that country. So it's not there is no there is no tourist for this to have access to this, and then the people that are part of the same country can remain in contact with each other. So the children not only grow up knowing from the beginning how they get to the world, but also they can still be in contact with these women, like a family, like a wider family, exactly. And also how different was the point of view of the women that offered themselves to act as a surrogate. So since they do from a lot of time, also the children born through this practice now are more than are adults. They can speak for themselves, and this is not something that could happen 20 years ago. when the technology was still in the beginning steps, and there were a lot of questions about how would be for a child, to born through this practice, what they would think. So now finally we can hear their voices if we are open to hear their voices. We have to take this time. We have to open ourselves to listen what the people feel and want to say about, but not people that are not really involved. The people that are directly involved in this practice. And then we took the time to also understand the voices of the people of our country, Italy, that live in a Catholic country where not only this practice is forbidden, but there's a big stigma about motherhood. And so in our country, like in many other Europe countries where it's banned, the people are forced to go abroad in country where there is languages barriers, there are economic gaps, and so what comes out, it depends really from the people that want to go through this path. As a person says in the documentaries, it's always a class. I would say it always depends from the economic possibility that the people have. If you cannot do it in your country, and then if it's not part of the healthy system of your country. And what can I say more about how we? So
we were welcome.
We were very welcome about your question. Actually, the only closed doors we found were from the institutional founders. We didn't find any economic support to produce this documentary. So we did it with our financials, because we really believe that it was important to have a totally independent point of view on this issue. And also, it took a lot of time to get also the trust from the people involved, to permit them to open their houses and to share with us very personal and intimate stories. Often in the film industry, you don't have so much time to
realize.
Yeah, also to stay to have a production open for years, for instance. You have to close the production, then it has to go in a film festival, and then have to go in a theatrical distribution or something like that. This issue for us was so big and so controversial that we couldn't give to a distributor or a producer like a certain delivery date. We just said, okay, let's do with our time. Let's take also the time for us to understand how complex is the issue, and then we were very, very happy to have the possibility to follow this how to say, very personal time to do it.
Right, thank you. So if you allow me, bear with me for a second, I would like to share my screen and show a few clips from your documentary. Just bear with me for a second. I would like to start from here. Can you all see and hear?
one of the principles of the Hippocratical Oath is to help all people who have a problem, either a medical problem or infertility problem, and they seek solution. I think it's the right of every woman, of every couple, to have a child. I know that in various countries in the European Union, for example, not all, but in various countries, legislation is more strict, among others, your country, Italy too. So I think that a couple who is not allowed in their country to use a method will easily go to another country to do it. Spain, for example, Greece, another example, and other countries. So I think that philosophically speaking, it's our duty as doctors to help all couples, for example, in my specialty, who cannot have children, to have children, which for me is the utmost privilege for a couple to fulfill their dreams of having a family. Every legal problem that does not allow a couple to have a child, I think the couple will have no borders, will see no borders, and they will travel all around the world to find a place to have a child. And Greece, because of its liberal legislation at the moment, has become a destination, medical destination, exactly for this reason, one of the reasons. And at the moment we have couples coming from 65 countries around the world for these reasons.
Sorry, bring back. Sorry, I have to go back and forth with the sharing of the screen. So I think that these images I kind of are from the one of the first scenes of the documentary, and I think that they kind of help us to put together two different things. First of all, it kind of reminds us of the science, the manipulation that is behind all this process that has to do with surrogacy. And then I think it's very interesting that the Greek doctor refers to the Hippocratic Oath, right, to help people. So it seems to me that those scenes kind of put together the modernity, you know, and the antiquity of it all in a way. So I was wondering if you can comment a little bit on this combination.
What can we say about that?
That, of course, modernity and the past are well connected in this scene, because, of course, today we can face with this new possibility to become parents because of technology's advance in this field. Yes, of course. And there is also a principle, the Hippocratical one, that can inspire some doctors that work in this field. I want to say that regarding this clip that was shooted in Greece, those doctors that work in Greece are in a difficult position, to be honest, because what happened is that there the legislation says that you can help couple, but you cannot act as an intermediate to put them in contact with the surrogate mother. So, and also says that as a surrogate, you cannot say, you cannot publicize yourself freely. So how can a couple that came from another country can meet the person that will help them through the clinics? Of course, this is the procedure, this is the practice, but the law doesn't permit it. So there is a gray area
in which the people have to move. It's a very, very strange and uncomfortable situation
for people that came from abroad. and because they have to found by themselves in some forums online people that are unable to help, or they have to ask to those doctors to do something that is not permitted in their country. So this is one of the points that have to be improved in this legislation. In Greece, we also need to say that there is no space for organization or association that can do mediation between intentional parents and surrogates. Instead, in England, it's permitted. So it's better. It's better for doctors. It's better for intentional parents. It's better for surrogates. It's better for everyone to be clear, to be under the light of the sun.
Of course, of course. And this comes at a time when, like in Italy, you know, Minister Rossella just basically told the doctors to be spy, you know, and so even the role
it's incredible.
that play. Yes, definitely.
Yeah, it's
definitely.
absurd. It's absurd because it's something that is not in their role. We cannot ask them to report people that ask for their help.
Yes,
it's
I agree.
against the ontology of their work.
Exactly. Let me move forward. We're still in Greece in the next clip that I want to show you, and there's a woman who reflects on another issue that concerns surrogacy, that is the implication that leads to inequalities. So let me just play this clip.
Yeah.
Παρ' όλα αυτά, η νομοθεσία που δεν υπάρχει αναγκάζει τους ανθρώπους να προβαίνουν σε πράξεις παράνομες εξαιτίας της μεγάλης τους ανάγκης να γίνουν γονείς. Όλα τα πράγματα σε αυτή τη ζωή είναι ταξικά. Όταν λοιπόν ένα ζευγάρι αντρών έχει τα χρήματα που χρειάζεται για να πάει στην Αμερική ή στον Καναδά, όπου η διαδικασία είναι νόμιμη και οι γυναίκες που συμμετέχουν το έχουν κάνει με τη δική τους βούληση, τότε όλα είναι πάρα πολύ καλά. Όταν όμως δεν υπάρχουν τα χρήματα, οι άνθρωποι δεν μπαίνουν στη διαδικασία να γίνουν γονείς ή προσπαθούν να βρουν άλλους πλάγιους τρόπους, παράνομους, που έχουν λιγότερο κόστος, αλλά τελικά αποδεικνύονται πιο κοστοβόροι και πιο ψυχοφθόροι. Αυτό που λέω εγώ είναι ότι όλα να γίνονται στο φως, με συγκεκριμένες νομοθετικές ρυθμίσεις, ώστε να μειωθούν και τα φαινόμενα εκμετάλλευσης των γυναικών, γιατί όταν μπορεί ο άλλος πολύ εύκολα και πολύ νόμιμα να κάνει κάτι, γιατί να πάει να το κάνει παράνομα με γυναίκες που τις εκμεταλλεύονται, αν μπορεί να το κάνει με γυναίκες που συνενούν και επιθυμούν να το κάνουν αυτό και ξέρει ότι το παιδί του θα έχει και μια καλή σχέση στο μέλλον με αυτή τη γυναίκα.
So, any comments that you can give us on this moment and this aspect of surrogacy?
Yeah, I think that this clip is related with money, with the payment of the surrogates. That is a taboo part of this issue, because the most part of the countries that has a legislation about this phenomena are not so well clear about the amount of money that a surrogate can ask for her services. I mean, there are some countries like Greece in which surrogate cannot ask any money. There is just an amount of money that she can take that is established by law. And there are other countries like England in which maybe there is a little bit of flexibility, but not too much, to be honest, because there is a limit of cash also there. So there is this general worry about the payment, because I think it's misunderstanding. It's not well understood issue. I want to say that as a woman say in our documentary, the money is not for the baby. So it's not the significant is not that you are going to pay for the baby. You are just going to pay for the time and effort that a woman will put to give you a baby. Because of course, as a woman that had a pregnancy, I can say by myself, it's quite it's tough. It's tough to have a pregnancy, not in the first period, but then it can be tough. And also there is also the delivery that is not a joke. So I think that since it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort from one person that decides to help, it's normal that you can receive something for what you are doing. And but we know that our society in general has a problem with money. Money is always an issue, and of course, when a childbirth is related to money, that issue will become bigger and bigger.
Right.
Yeah, if I can add something about the medical aspect that was shown during the clip.
No, we watched another clip now.
Sorry.
We watched the clip.
The school bus passed, so I had to
no worries.
adapt it.
I think we can go to the next one. Yeah, now. Okay.
Okay, perfect.
Which is so I don't know which one you were referring to, Darel. My next one is
I was referring to the first one, the medical aspect that we included in the movie. So all the first clip, in which you see all the medical procedure.
Yeah.
Because usually when we speak about surrogacy, when people speak about surrogacy, just think about elderly couples that had fun all their life and then decide to have a child. They could not have it and then try to have access to surrogacy. Right. But instead, what we, I can say, discover in first person is how tough is go through this process, this medical process. It's very invasive, especially for the women. So even if you are not bearing your child, first of all, you have to face as a woman to the fact that you cannot have your own pregnancy. And this is something that probably most of the people don't think about when we speak about surrogacy. For a woman, it's one of the first struggling. Then, if a woman can use her own egg, has to go through a medical process to use this egg. And also for the surrogate, it's a very invasive process. So even if there is money involved, I'm talking about the countries, not like third world countries that we didn't involve for specific reasons, but for the countries where we have been, the women that decide to go through this process really think about it, because it's not easy at all for them to do it, and we have to consider it that it's not something that you do like have a coffee, like or have just a surgery. It's something physically and mentally very very strong, very tough, and that's why it's not so easy to get a conclusion,
Right.
simple conclusion, an easy
Yes.
conclusion.
Yes, very, very demanding and not an easy decision.
Demanding.
Let me, since you're saying that, and let me explore a little bit more. There's a clip that I think it's very important that kind of tells us a little bit and goes into the moms who decide to be the surrogate mothers. And one in particular struck me, or the decision that you also included this. I think it's very good because it really shows all the aspects. And this woman talks about the postpartum depression that she had, so she's not shy about sharing her the problems that also come with it.
So how I felt, I didn't know how my heart would feel when we had the first scan. So my couple that I had, the intended parents came with me to the scan, and all I felt was just elation for them. So I watched them watching the screen. So I felt quite disconnected to the baby. I had this desire to nurture it. I was a nanny in my profession, so I looked at it as a form of extreme nannying. But it was a very positive experience. And I would love to have done it again, but I did actually go postnatal. I had got postnatal depression after the surrogacy, and felt really guilty that, I felt that I felt bad for not feeling more for the baby because she was half my blood, my egg, my genes. But I knew that I didn't want another baby. She was purely born for someone else. And I think I sort of all went round in my head, and I thought, that maybe I was heartless, that I didn't want the baby or feel anything stronger than a desire for her to always be happy and well in life. I didn't feel any maternal feelings towards her at all. And the first person to hold the baby was the mother, not me. So that was my one thing. I had all my babies put onto my chest, skin to skin, but I didn't want this baby because she wasn't mine, she was theirs. So she did a lovely skin to skin after I delivered the baby, and that was a really, really important moment for me. And I felt nothing but pure joy. It was the best. I'd love to do it again. I wished I'd done it again, but I cannot tell you the pure joy I felt in helping people that couldn't have babies any other way create a family. The happiness it gave them, it was just worth all the pain and all the stress. Yeah, it was worth it.
So here I think she touches on many points. So first of all, as you were saying before, the fact that she's a woman who she decided she wanted to be a protagonist in this. There's also, she touches on the fact that especially there's the one that follows. I don't think that we have time to show it, but through the documentaries we understand how some women just decide to become the host. So there's references to traditional surrogacy and gestational surrogacy, but also she kind of shares certainly the joy that came with it, but also what you were saying before, how hard it was, how demanding it was, and also the fact that she ended up having a postpartum depression. So can you just perhaps reflect a little further on that?
Yeah, I think that there is also another point to highlight that is related to the feeling of motherhood. Each one of us can be a different mother. Each one of us can have a different relation with the baby that could bear. So we have this big narration in which the mother has to be in a certain way, and then there is the reality in which each of us is a different mother. And for surrogacy, the issues is wider. I mean, I can bear a child that is not my child, and I can be conscious that it's not my child. And I also can be proud to help some other woman to be a mother. So differences between the feelings of motherhood.
Yes. Okay. I would like to that we have a couple of questions, I understand, from the audience. There's one more clip that I would like to show the audience, which is the daughter's perspective as well, to close with it. So bear with me one more time. I think she's here.
My brother and his wife struggled to get pregnant. IVF.
I'm sorry. It's this one. I'm very sorry. It was the one that I wanted.
I was born through altruistic surrogacy in 1998 in the UK. My parents were in the Midlands and went through COTS, so Childlessness Overcome Through Surrogacy, an organisation to find my surrogate mother. She had already had a son of her own and had already done surrogacy for another family. So I've got my oldest half-brothers, Dominic and Alex. I was then born in 1998. And I then had another half-brother who was her own son, born about 10 years later. So I have 3 half-siblings, 2 live with her, 1 is with a different family, and I grew up in the Midlands with my parents. So I found out I was born through surrogacy from the moment I was born. I was always told, I was always in contact with all of my family, and it was always explained to me who everybody was. My parents used to refer to my surrogate mum as my tum mum, as in I'd come from her tummy, and that made a lot of sense to me. I remember always knowing all of my family and seeing them regularly, and even to the point where at school, when I was maybe 4 or 5, I was asked to draw a picture of my parents, and I drew my mum and my dad, and then my tum mum. And my teacher was very confused, and she asked my parents to come into the school to explain why I was drawing 2 mums. And when they explained to her, it made total sense that I saw my surrogate mum as an important parental figure, as a mum, in the sense of biology, but fully understood that socially I had my parents and that's who I was growing up with. So I always understood the role.
Sorry. So it's interesting because, again, we're in England. Things seem to be much different, and people more open to discuss this. And I think it's interesting because she really puts into question what is a family, right? That is, this not the model that we've been, told that it is for centuries now, and I think it's very interesting, and she's very open about it. And so, can you comment on it real quick? I don't think we can hear you. You're muted.
Yeah, actually, as anthropologists, this is one of the most important focus for us to rethink the way the kinship, the way we think about parenthood. In a certain way, in a country like Italy, we had this path in which a woman that couldn't have the milk for his or her own child asked to another woman to help. And this
with breastfeeding.
Yeah, with breastfeeding. And this was part of our old culture in which people helped each other to grow the kids. And these women weren't banned from the community. The people had respect for these women because they had the kids grow up knowing that that woman breastfeeds him. So in a certain,
Him or her.
him or her. So in a certain way, besides all the law and the taboo, the cultural taboo, people always have found a way to help each other. In this moment that we are living, probably surrogacy is helping us to rethink one more time the way we can be collaborative to reach the truly sincere desire to become parents, because this is was also another aspect that came out through our research, in the sense that we really went in contact with a truly sincere desire to become parents, that also brought us to the reflection that so many people become parents without thinking too much of how important and how it will change your life with this experience. Instead, to the other side, the parents that cannot have a child so spontaneously have to think a lot how they will get to this point, how they will reach this goal, and this really helps them to understand first of all if his parents or her parents is the right one, or if really parenthood is something that they really want for themselves. So there is a wider reflection behind becoming parents than compared to the people that just have a kid spontaneously. Do you want to add something about?
I think it's okay what you say, but yes, of course, a point is what is family and how can we shape today our family, and of course, a family is a wider circle of people that love each other and is not necessarily linked to biological descendants. And what the experience of this young woman that talks in the clip says is that we can be the same family if we want to be a family, and I think this is a love message.
Right, thank you. I think we have a question. We still have a couple of minutes, but I was hoping, I don't know if it's a real question, but I'm going to read it. She says, this is from Gangesh, beyond medical legal binary, surrogacy do possess ethical aspects, which at times are ambivalent and ambiguous. So can we have a universal framework to propose an alternative? I guess was a reflection. What would be your position, I guess?
Me too.
Can you say again?
Yes, she's asking. She's reflecting on the fact that surrogacy do possess ethical aspects, which at times are ambivalent and ambiguous. So she's wondering, can we have a universal framework, according to you, to propose an alternative?
Okay. We can have to. We can say together. Okay. I think that it's impossible to have a universal frame because cultures are different and circumstances are different. So it's impossible to have it. It's also impossible to have the same point of view for each of the cases of surrogacy. So we must reflect on the differences, and we have to be clear with what is ethic and what is not ethic. Of course, we need to respect the others. We need to respect, first of all, the words of the others. The other's women, the other's intentional parents, and the other's sons of daughter. So from this point we can start to understand well the phenomena. But of course, during our journey, what we understood that is that it's impossible to have an absolute point of view on this phenomena, because from Europe to Asia to North America or Africa is very different. There are so many different cases, so we can reflect on those we knew, and we can encourage people to do it under a clear legislation and under the light of the sun and respecting each other. This is our advice. And
yeah, probably this technology came too early compared to the problem we already face, like global economic inequity. So first of all, we should work in the direction to a universal basic income and yeah, a more wider concept or individual freedom instead of just the freedom to move our to trade everything all over the world, instead to let the people move yeah, in a free world. So yeah, probably we have to still work a lot on the cultural acceptance of what is freedom and how we can get freedom to the people, to the women, that can have a really free decision about what they want to do with their body.
Well, I'm so sorry because we're running out of time, and I would love to keep talking to you longer. But I will encourage everybody here to go and watch. There's so much more in this documentary that we have been able to talk about. So I really encourage you to go and see it. You can find it online. Again, the title is Surrogacy Underground by Rossella Anitori and Darel Di Gregorio. Thank you again for being here with us today.
Thank you too. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Back. Welcome back to everyone, and I'm really happy. I would like to thank Rickie Solinger for accepting our invitation today and for being our keynote speaker. I would like to introduce you briefly, Rickie, even though everyone knows you and have read your text, since most of the participants are interested in reproductive justice and are very familiar with your work. So thank you very much for being with us today and for joining our conversation. Rickie is a historian writing about reproductive politics. She is the founder and senior editor of the University of California Press book series, Reproductive Justice, A New Vision for the 21st Century. She is also a curator working with artists, organizing exhibitions about reproductive politics and satellite topics. She is the author of several books, dozens of books, including Wake Up Little Susie, Pregnancy and Power, A History of Reproductive Politics in the United States, The Abortionist, A Woman Against the Law, and with Loretta Ross, Reproductive Justice, An Introduction. Today, she is going to give a speech on reproductive justice, the idea and the strategy. Thank you so much, Rickie. And you can start whenever you want to.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And thank you for inviting me, and it's very nice to be here. I didn't know very much about who I would be speaking to and how much you would be familiar with a US-based practice such as I have been pursuing. And so, and I also forgot the topic. I forgot the title of my essay. So I just wrote down what I wanted to tell you because, and actually I have thought of myself as a somewhat peculiar or unusual keynote speaker because, of course, I'm not an expert in surrogacy. Although I do want to say that this book series that I manage and run at the University of California Press has a forthcoming book about reproductive technologies, which will include some very extensive discussions of surrogacy. And the author is Kamisha Russell, who is a philosopher, and she's working with a law professor. It'll be out probably in about a year. I think the manuscript is just going in now. But I'm not an expert in surrogacy, and my work is largely US focused. I understand this audience to be mightily diverse nationally, and which is always so exciting and not that common for me to address. But even though my work is not probably the same as the work that many of you do, what I'm going to talk about, and what I talk about may seem very different from your core subjects and concerns, but I'm hoping that the topics I raise and the questions that and perspectives that I'll deliver will suggest connections and new queries for you. First, I want to talk a bit about how the areas that I chose to work in moved me away, very dramatically away from concepts and analyses of individual reproductive rights and toward an analysis that I think of now as proto-reproductive justice, that is before I knew anything about reproductive justice, which was actually born as a framework, a movement, a point of many claims in around 1994. And I was working, I should say that just a point of interest is that I am a deinstitutionalized person. I have never taught. I write all these academic books, so I have academic colleagues, and I don't know how they really, I mean, a lot of people have said to me, oh, I wish I could do what you do and, not have to grade papers and not have to give all these classroom lectures. And I always say to them, well, you want a paycheck, don't you? And you want colleagues, don't you, who are at your elbow? And you also want an institution to give you status in life. So I sort of move along without those three rather important features of life. But I am a hermit, so it suits me. Also, I wonder about how much time I want to spend with young adults. That's a very important consideration for me. Besides the fact, one last personal item here is that I was a very bad student when I was a young adult, and I never understood what was going on in the classroom. I always thought, who are these people, and why do they want me to know that? So I didn't want to be pressing what I know on other people, but here I am telling you what I know. So it wasn't long after 1994 that I began to associate myself with a politics of reproduction that was really quite distinct from individual choice and personal rights to this new way of thinking about reproductive necessities. So first I'll look at the areas that I chose to work in, and second, I will talk about reproductive justice and how the work, the topics that I chose and what I did with those topics moved me inexorably and very fortunately toward an association, in particular, I guess, with Loretta Ross, and into that domain where people were seemed so much more expansively enlightened than the old, I guess, second wave white feminist US perspective of individual choice and rights. So my subjects, if it's really true that you all know my work so much, I don't know whether that's really true, but if it's really true, this will be repetitious for you. But I became a scholarly historian by immersing myself in questions about single pregnancy and race in the United States in the post-World War II decades. And I was so struck. I mean, I actually fell asleep on my couch one afternoon when I had to face the question of a dissertation topic. And I woke up with a start, realizing that I had I must have had a dream, an intimation of this topic, which is contrasting what happened to white girls and women who had babies without having husbands, and Black girls and women in the same situation in the United States. And what a profound contrast there was, and what could I learn about that, about what I did learn about it. I don't know how I would have put it as I woke up from that sleep, but I addressed the role through this topic of racialized reproduction in national politics, the role of racialized reproduction in national politics. For example, how in the era of the civil rights movement, single pregnancy and official solutions to single pregnancy were entirely racialized in ways that so effectively recaptured the claim that the races were different from each other, not as in the civil rights movement, a kind of a vision of an unraced future where racial difference would be subsumed and merged into an equal playing ground or an equal sense of humanity. This emphasis on racial difference of unwed pregnant females was absolutely used to resist civil rights claims. Actually, I have to keep my paper in a place where I can see it. Creating sharp and meaningful distinctions between, I never know if I should say white girls and women or white girls. I'm going to say girls because we're kind of paradigmatically talking about teenage pregnancies in some ways, but who were diagnosed by the experts as having gotten pregnant without a husband due to psychological disorders. They were psychologically not, well, what's the right word for that? I don't know, not normal. They were, because their mothers were dominant in the families and because the fathers were weak, and there were family dynamics that created psychological disorders which led them to pregnancy. Black girls and women, on the other hand, were diagnosed as having no psychology. That was part of the racist trope that Black girls and women got pregnant without having husbands because they were oversexed, because they could not control their bodies, they couldn't control their urges. So we have these two causes entirely racialized with enormous consequences for who could be a legitimate citizen and who could not, because civil rights claims notwithstanding, how could somebody be a citizen if their lives were governed by, and the engine behind their lives was unbridled sexuality. Together, these two assessments worked. And I mean, this is one of the things I began to realize too, is how racism and racial difference depends so profoundly on dualities, and how you can't give white sexuality and reproduction the meaning you do without that is the honor and the value that white reproduction has had in the United States without its opposite. These two depend on each other for meaning. Also, I learned that these politics distinguished the value of white babies who were in this context where adoption was being invented as commodities. They were cast as valuable commodities that that white families all over the country were competing for. There were high rates of teen pregnancy, but in the era of white family mandate, there was an unending need, so that there were 7 and 8 and 12 families vying for each illegitimate child to incorporate into their white family, and so that they could achieve the white family post-war mandate. So these white babies were valuable commodities at the same time, and necessarily dependent on the valueless, expensive, and ironically or paradoxically worthless Black babies. And together, these dynamic definitions gave meaning to the concept of racial difference, and the need to respond to white unwed pregnancy differently from Black unwed pregnancy. These politics also created adoption policies and practices, as I said, that bolstered the post-war white family imperative, at the same time that welfare policies and a raft of other kinds of policies were degrading the Black family very brutally. So once again, we see how reproduction was a very important factor in the response. The racialized response to racialized reproduction was absolutely key in racial politics in the United States, which was, sort of everything in the decades after World War II. And via policy and public rhetoric, these reproductive politics associated Black reproduction, treated as by definition as unwed, with post-war tropes. This is crucial, such as the population bomb. That is, these people were reproducing excessively, contributing to the population bomb, to welfare expenditures, to urban disorder, and to social decline. So we see that the white babies were producing new white families that would be meet all of the required norms of suburban post-war life, and Black women were producing something altogether different. That is, not building society, enhancing society, structuring the value of family, but just being totally destructive forces. We think of these decades in the United States, historians of the US, as ones in which the struggle for civil rights was bloody and difficult, but there was a very strong vector toward in that direction. Of course, now our national politics shows us how completely what a failure that time was and how virulent white supremacy is today. And in just a few days, we'll get the final verdict on that one, and I'm afraid it won't be good. I'm going to dwell here a minute on adoption because of its association or its overlap in some ways with surrogacy. The when I had my dream on the couch, I did not foresee what my relationship would be with the white women who, as teenagers, were coerced to give up their babies for adoption. They were told in legions and thousands that, and of course we know that abortion was illegal at this time, and there was no accessible birth control, broadly accessible birth control or effective birth control. The birth control pill came on the market in 1960. But it was only available under prescription and it was very difficult. I happen to know that it was very difficult to obtain. I happen personally to know that it was the birth control pills were very difficult to obtain if you were an unmarried, even white person with resources. In fact, when my sister went away to college and left her birth control prescription at the pharmacy, I would regularly go in and pretend I was she. You're supposed to smile at that. That's how hard it was. But these white girls were constrained in really terribly brutal ways, told that without a husband, they couldn't be a mother. And besides that, because their psychology, I have to just say one really important thing to me is that before this period, in the 1920s and 30s, with eugenics governing ideas about reproduction and which children were valuable and which were not, the idea of having a child without being married was associated with poor people, with people who came from alcoholic households, or people whose parents had subnormal intelligence, and they themselves probably had subnormal intelligence. So no one was trying to adopt these children. They would go to orphanages or foster care, or they would be kept by the disgraced young woman. But after Freudian theory began to infiltrate social service delivery in the United States, and white single pregnancy was associated with psychological disorders, that had enormous consequences for the value of the white baby who would be born to this young woman, because her body could be untainted. Her mind might be disordered, but her body was not a site of degradation. So the baby could be born untainted. And that had, as I say, enormous consequences for the value of that infant. Then people began to vie very vigorously to own that baby, to adopt that baby. And that was the switcheroo that made the birth and the burgeoning of the adoption market and the commodification of these babies all possible. I want to say that once I began, I did all of my research for Wake Up Little Susie, my first book, in the National Archives, where the papers of the Children's Bureau reside, which was the agency in the United States that was overseeing the official response to unwanted pregnancy in the post-war decades. So I was reading, I didn't have any real alive voices in my ear when I was putting all of these ideas together. But as soon as this book was published, I began to hear from people like mad And what I learned about adoption from the people who told me about crying themselves to sleep every night for 25, 30 years and never being able to let go of the idea of where their baby is, or and the efforts to reune with their children and the complexities of that. What I learned was from them, this is what they wanted me to know. They didn't put it in these terms because they weren't academics, but what I learned from them and have tested variously over time is that there is no such thing as adoption except off the backs of resourceless women. And secondly, that the choices of some women, so we want to incorporate a concept of choice in this matter, that that adoption represents the choices of some women made, the choices of some women depending on the choicelessness of others. And very crucial idea. And that these stories and these really difficult insights that people forced me to look at led me to such profound matters as who gets to be a mother, who doesn't get to be a mother, and who decides. And these questions have, sort of really guided me, I would say, throughout the rest of the, I think one of you said, somebody said I wrote dozens of books. That's going too far. I think I'm on number 13. So I barely made 1 dozen. And some of them are edited. So, and because I was researching and writing in the early 90s, this book, Susie, I was very aware. I mean, I think my first project was to write about what happened when abortion was a crime, what happened in the criminal era. And the first book was about people who got pregnant and stayed pregnant because they didn't have any options. And what happened to them, and what I saw was that when was the avenues, the vehicles, the operations that went into place to, as I keep on saying, racialize these matters. It was just like that. That's what happened. But so I then went on to write a book about the criminal era. What was abortion like in the criminal era? And of course, and in some ways that was the only book I've ever written in which race wasn't at the center, but in some ways, even in its absence, it was, even in its more explicit absence, it was. I wanted to understand some of the meanings of abortion in US society. In order to do that, I collected abortion trial transcripts from the criminal era, because actually from the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, because I wanted to find out what was at issue in the courtroom. What was the crime? What was the nature of the crime? What was going on here? So I'm going to severely boil down here what I learned from these trial transcripts, which were amazing to read. And I still have them really close to me in that closet right over there, because I actually want to go back and ask another question of them, which is I'll get to here. But what I learned from these trial transcripts was that the treatment of girls and women in the courtroom showed that when abortion was a crime, no female could achieve full citizenship status. I mean, you wouldn't think that just criminalizing abortion would have such a profound impact on citizenship status. But I'm going to tell you a really fast story. And what page am I on? Okay, I'm okay, I think. Which is Miss Smith, who was called into the court to describe to the male jurors, the male judge, the male observers of this proceeding, because after all, it was about sex, and it was what I call crypto porn. And she sat on the stand, and a court aide wheeled in the table on which her body was arrayed. Did I tell this story in Boston? I don't know, maybe I didn't. I like to tell this story as often as I can because it's such it just captures so much that the table is wheeled in, and the prosecutor says to her, Miss Smith, could you tell us how your body was arrayed on this table? How far apart were your legs spread? And which instruments were put into which of your orifices? And by the way, Miss Smith, could you also tell us why you were willing to have sexual relations with that man, but you were not willing to have his baby? And by the way, also, Miss Smith, could you tell us before you complete your testimony, how many other men have you had sex with whose babies you were unwilling to have? So clearly, if we just put our attention on that one piece of testimony from one trial, and there are many such examples, various examples, we get a pretty clear idea that this courtroom is a place that defines women as less than full persons, less than full citizens, not in command of any feature of their life, not to say only their reproductive bodies. The crime at issue, it turns out, was not against the fetus. Very few people in the courtroom and all of these trial transcripts across states and across years talked about the death of the fetus. What they were much more concerned with was the unwillingness of a girl or a woman to live out her destiny as a true woman and a mother. Each time she got pregnant. Very important recognition for what criminalizing women's sovereignty over their bodies is really about. The worst danger, this is the third major thing that I learned from these transcripts, which is that the worst danger that females faced in the criminal era when they went to seek an abortion, or when they were females having heterosexual sex, was not the so-called back alley butcher, who was the iconic criminal practitioner who would maim them, who would kill them, who would violate them sexually. And by the way, I also found out in this study that the statistics do not show that the statistics were much worse for poor women and women of color than they were for white women. But there are no statistics that show a very high death rate associated with criminal abortion. That's part of something else, part of another agenda. But that the worst danger that women faced in this period was not the back alley butcher, which is how it's always described, the coat hanger wielded by the butcher, but it was the law itself, because the law said that women could not control their own bodies, that not only the ones who climbed on the table, but all women had to face this inability to control their own bodies. And that was an incredibly dangerous series of laws to women who were trying to achieve citizenship, achieve reproductive health, achieve many, many things. And of course, once again, I encountered the race and class dimensions of reproductive politics, in this case regarding abortion access, safety, and danger under criminalization, and also regarding access to the courtroom, because of course, to go in the courtroom, actually, that's misleading, because people were in the courtroom because they were called to testify against the person who was being prosecuted, that is, the person who did the abortion. Again, we face questions about maternal status. In this case, questions about who gets sovereignty over her own body, over her ability to control reproductive decisions, and who does not. These things come into sharp focus in the courtroom and in real life and in lived experience about these things. Okay, so after reading, and this, I'm going to talk about reproductive justice now. After reading and researching and writing for a decade, I could understand pretty well the grotesque limits of the concept of reproductive choice. How could choice operate under the slavery regime, for example? If we were going to if we were going to understand what women need, what people need in order to have sovereignty over their own bodies, we need to understand that a lack of sovereignty over one's body is part of American history, and it demonstrates the limits of the concept of choice. I mean, maybe some people could say, well, choice, and I have argued this, is a consumerist notion that was very useful in the birth of rampant American consumerism. But but we nevertheless need to consider how choice can operate when people's reproduction is completely governed by structures and authorities out of their control. Under Indian removal, Indian wars, these things, and the removal of children from their families and tribes. I mean, Native women have not have been denied sovereignty over their own bodies. What did choice mean in this period to, and continuing, to disabled girls and women severely enjoined against having sex and reproducing? What did choice mean then and now to poor girls and women targeted for punishment by public policies and political rhetoric, systematically denied the resources I, for example, learned I needed to be able to reproduce with dignity and safety? Now I could understand how how key, central, and crucial population policy has been in the United States, and in fact, in most countries, all countries, changing over time, but always key to achieving national goals, such as, for example, fostering and sustaining white supremacy, fostering and sustaining male supremacy. Population policy has been at the center, was at the center in the 18th and 19th century, and in various ways today, of peopling the continent. Population policy, and therefore women's bodies and the value of their reproduction, or valuelessness of their reproduction, has been core to meeting economic, labor, and military needs, birthing future soldiers and workers and consumers. Have you guys heard about this novel argument that 3 attorneys general are making in the United States? One state is Idaho. I can't remember the other 2 right now. But these attorney generals are making the case that they have a really good reason to criminalize medication abortion, as well as surgical abortion, because every child which is not born is harming that state's political representation, because the representation to Congress is determined by the size of the population of the state. So if too many children aren't born, then you lose representation, and of course you lose consumers to buy the products in your state. So this puts on women the absolute responsibility for political viability to have babies. It's their duty, to say nothing of their destiny. And finally, once our analysis demonstrates that all politics are reproductive politics, then we can look at and understand the forces arrayed historically and today against people according to their race and class and other characteristics, people who want to reproduce, people who don't want to reproduce, people who want to be parents and those who don't want to be parents, people who desperately want to raise their children under conditions of environmental safety with access to medical services, educational resources, safe neighborhoods, decent housing, human dignity. And so that's what reproductive justice is. Reproductive justice says, and this is really hard for a lot of American, particularly second wave white feminists, is, I can't tell you what the struggle has been like here for many women to grasp that their years of struggling for abortion rights and their years of desperate struggling to protect abortion rights, why, if given all that, how can we be talking about reproductive justice, which gives a place to abortion, but it doesn't, abortion is not the be all and the end all of reproductive dignity, safety, and rights. Abortion is necessary and totally insufficient. We know that over the last 50 years, when abortion rights were legal everywhere, many women could not access them. Many women who could access them and didn't choose to also recognized that they lived in places where becoming a parent was a very dangerous thing to do. The environment was poor, the schools were poor, housing was non-existent. So reproductive justice says that all of these resources are necessary in order to be able to reproduce with dignity and safety. And that perspective has significant applications for adoption, for surrogacy, for many, many topics embedded in the domain of reproductive politics. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rickie, for your speech and for this overview. And now we have some time for questions. So we can take some minutes for questions or comments, or maybe something that you would like to add to our discussion today. I don't see any questions so far in the chat, but please feel free to write it in the chat if you would like to ask something, or let us know. I don't see questions.
Do you have a question?
Maybe, do you have some questions, Laura?
Go ahead, Giulia.
I was curious to ask you, thank you very much for your speech. I absolutely was taking notes, and I would like to ask you how what you just explained to us, because today we're just focusing on discussing surrogacy in particular, translates to surrogacy, and also, what do you think is the most urgent thing that needs to be done to address, all the controversy and everything?
Well, I think it'd be a very bad idea to elect Donald Trump. I mean, I'm an American. What can I say? I think that regarding the first part of your question, I think I wanted to underscore this matter of who gets to be a parent, who doesn't get to be a parent, who decides, and what conditions are present or absent that makes it possible for people to do that, and what happens when physical processes, and these are things that the people in the surrogacy arena talk about all the time, and I'm not one of them, so it's kind of, but you know, the idea of the risks of commodification. And you know, we've seen, when I talked about what happened when these white babies became commodified and they became so valuable and so sought after, and these young women who got pregnant, or is in America, the United States, as the language went then, she got herself pregnant. Probably happens in Italy too.
Of course.
That so yeah, and it was one of the justifications for rather brutally forcing each and every one of these young women to relinquish, to surrender was the language, to surrender their babies for adoption. So all of that conversation, everything that I write about in Wake Up Little Susie, the first book, is fodder for consideration in the surrogacy domain, because it's all about, these are just, it's the same practice, just in a different point in time. So these young women before, and of course it's still going on today in very religious communities, in particular in evangelical communities where the daughter in the family is still the least powerful. I mean, that's even the wrong way to put it, the most powerless. And her parents decide that she's not going to get married, she has to surrender the baby. So the value of the white baby is, and of course surrogacy, as I understand it, another thing I didn't say, another thing I learned from these matters is that the incidence of adoption in a country is an index of the powerlessness of women in that community or in that country. Because generally, people don't give up their babies if they have the resources to keep them. And to imagine, I mean, this is one of the things I really had to argue with people a lot about in the 90s. Oh, but I know somebody who did it and gave up their baby. She didn't want the baby. You have to imagine the other person, the relinquishing, the surrendering person, whether it's the surrender of, anyway, you have to imagine the surrendering person as fundamentally different from you, or from me anyway. That, I would never give up my children, I think. Of course, if I had not had my children's my sister's birth control pills, no, I would have, I had enough resources that I would have found a solution other than having to give that child up. But I really like my children, and I did since they came out of my body. So I have to imagine the surrendering young woman is fundamentally different from me. And what I found out from these hundreds of women who adopted me, because I wrote about their experience, I forgot that they would be real. And then after the book came out, they became totally real. And I went to their meetings for years and told them it wasn't their fault. I mean, that's one of the horrible things, is that these women spent all those years waking up crying, because not only because they missed their children, but because they felt that if they had only been able to fight back, they would have been able to keep them. I mean, obviously, one could argue that surrogacy appears to be the adult, the choice of an adult. And adoption was so often, was so typically and so often imposed on a powerless girl. But, you know, then we really must ask always questions about who doesn't have choices, or what does choice mean in a situation where the only way, I mean, you know what these issues are about surrogacy way better than I do. But, you know, in my mind, the questions are, what kind of work options or income options does a person have who will do something which is actually medically dangerous? And because pregnancy and childbirth are killers, especially under circumstances where reproductive health is not very accessible. What is the racialization that's going on in surrogacy arrangements? So even though there's not a mapping of one-to-one on the things I have studied and surrogacy, I think one doesn't have to be too creative to find the ways that they are associated and deal with some of the same conundrums and same difficulties. Long answer.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rickie. It's almost 4 p.m. and we should move on to the next session, but I hope we'll have the chance to continue the discussion since we are still discussing about this topic. And I would suggest that we take a short break, a few minutes. What do you think, Giulia?
Yeah, it's okay.
Couple of minutes and we come back at 5 past 4, shall I? Or 5 past 4. Okay, just take a very short break. Thank you so much, Rickie, and for your speech. And I hope you'll have the chance to stay with us, and we might continue our discussion later on. Otherwise, I'm sure
I have to go. But if there are questions, you could let me know, and I can.
Of course,
yes,
of course. I'm sure we'll have the chance to continue this discussion in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Rickie.
And we'll